Welcome to this week's Wellness Wednesday. And I'm going to be evolving the format of Wellness Wednesdays over the coming weeks. Up until now, I've been releasing excerpts from the interviews we did as part of the Fatigue Super Conference. And some of the feedback, we were asking for feedback over recent weeks of the vlog. Some of the feedback was that you guys were preferring the original new content. And it also became clear that Everyday Alex was becoming very skewed towards psychology perspectives. And this is partly because that's my personal practitioner focus. But I realized that I wanted to give more of a voice to the nutrition and functional medicine based work that we do here at Optimum Health Clinic. So over the coming months, I'm going to have some kind of short snapshot interviews with some of the nutrition practitioner team here. And we're going to start to take specific elements of the overall approach and protocol that we have and try and make those simple and accessible. So rather than doing whole long interviews around digestive function, as an example, that we'll try and do a series of short videos looking at things like basics of understanding SIBO or candida or parasites or whatever. So we'll do that hopefully over a period of time, taking the different bodily systems and then doing videos where we take the kind of specific ingredients and try and make that all a bit more accessible. So I think that'll be an ongoing series. It will take a few weeks to get that ready in terms of scheduling and kind of planning and starting to record those. But that's the kind of plan of where we're going to go. Originally, for today's video, I was going to talk about how I see integrative medicine and the kind of defining and giving context to that. And I started recording it, and then I got on a specific point that I started to get carried away on. And I decided that the video wasn't going to work because it started off with one title and went somewhere else. And actually, I've just started re-recording because I think this is a really, really important point to make. And I think it deserves its own video. So it's a little bit out of context of where Wellness Wednesdays are going to evolve to. But in some ways, I think it also serves as an important frame from which to understand and kind of meet these Wellness Wednesdays episodes over time. And this is the danger of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a phrase that, as I understand it, has come from understanding rigidity in political perspectives. So people that hold a political view and they then refuse or they negate information that contradicts that perspective. And I'm not brave enough to get into politics on this vlog. I'm not sure it's a good idea. Anyway, there's plenty of other places people can go to talk about politics. But I think it's a really important concept in the understanding of medicine and wellness and in fact, not just health, but also psychology and self-development as well. The confirmation bias is where we look for evidence that confirms a position that we already hold to be true. So we believe something, and then we go and we look for the evidence that supports what we believe. But more than that, we negate and we tend to ignore the evidence that contradicts what we believe. Now, to break this down a little bit further into why we do this from a psychological perspective, there are different statistics and data on this, but one way of looking at it is there is something like 2 million pieces of information that are available to us in any one moment, consciously and unconsciously. Consciously, we can only focus on about 7 things at any one time. Between 5 to 9 things is the psychological research. So we have to organize an enormous amount of information, and we have to focus on a very narrow amount of information to be able to function in the world. Otherwise, we go into a complete kind of overwhelm and inability to function. So the brain has to generalize, delete, and distort information to organize the world to function. So, for example, we generalize that we learn to open a door when we're a child. Like we now open a door, and suddenly you open a door, and that opens a lot of doors because suddenly you can get out into the world. But if every time you got to a door, you had to relearn doors, It's like the world would be a very complex and slow place to move through. It's also why when we get a door that doesn't open the way we expect, like a sliding door, we kind of get frustrated because it doesn't respond the way we expect it to. So we have to generalize from one experience to many. We also have to delete, because if we are looking at 2 million pieces of information every second, we're not going to go anywhere. So we have to delete information that doesn't seem relevant and important. We have a part of our brain called the reticular activating system. And that is the part of our brain which is trained to spot and look for patterns. That's why you or your partner become pregnant, for example, and suddenly you see babies everywhere. Or you get a new pair of trainers, for example. I know I think of trainers, but a new pair of trainers, and you start seeing those trainers everywhere, that you see the patterns. We also have to distort reality. That it's like creativity is taking two things that are not quite the same and kind of matching them together and creating something slightly new. So we distort to be able to create variety and to bring new things forth. So this generalizations and deletions and distortions, this way we organize the world, is then what is the kind of underpinning of this confirmation bias. Why is this relevant in terms of healthcare? I remember when I was on my healing journey and I would go and see a homeopath or a naturopath or a body work or whatever it may be, any practitioner. And what became clear was they were holding the perspective that their way of working was the best way of working. And why were they holding that perspective? They were focusing on all the people they were working with which were improving and getting better. The ones that they weren't really helping probably would have 1 or 2 appointments and then kind of disappear, and they wouldn't really get the feedback from those people. They would then read the articles and the books which would reinforce the approach that they had. They just wouldn't spend the time looking at the other evidence and information. And then they would be needing to promote what they do. So they would be going out and kind of selling to others the value of their approach. So you can see how honest, good, caring people end up with a confirmation bias. By the way, orthodox medicine, it does this to great extremes, that completely ignoring other feedback and data and experiences that people have that don't fit with the model. We also can do this, if we're on the healing path, that we look for the evidence that supports the belief structures that we hold. So if we don't believe recovery is possible, we will delete or distort recovery stories when we see them. And we will generalize from our experience of I'm not recovering, therefore nobody else is recovering. I remember when my first book came out, and people would say, you've either never had ME chronic fatigue in the first place, or you have not made a recovery, because it's not possible to recover. That was always an example of someone holding a confirmation bias. They were holding their perspective, and then they were just kind of holding a position that therefore that must be true for everyone else. So why is this important? This is important from a number of different perspectives. Firstly, what's your confirmation bias? What are the beliefs that you hold about yourself and your ability to recover? And how do you go out there and collect evidence that helps you maintain and hold and support those beliefs? But also the practitioners that you work with. What are their confirmation biases? What are the ways that they're not open to or seeing other parts of the jigsaw, other parts of the picture, because they're just looking for the confirmation of the perspective that they hold? One of the things that we've gone to great lengths to do here at Optimum Health Clinic is to try to integrate as many pieces of the jigsaw. So we really try to challenge our own confirmation bias, that we're not just doing, a few things that we do and constantly looking for all the evidence of those things and ignoring everything else. And it's inevitably, there is always new ideas and new perspectives that are emerging. So how are you using confirmation bias to not see things that may be helpful or important for you to see? And are you, when you're kind of interacting with practitioners, is there a danger in those interactions that they're also not seeing kind of pieces of the jigsaw that may well be important? Maybe it's a separate video in terms of how to challenge and how to change confirmation bias, but this is also one of these examples that if you can see it, you don't have to be it. That if you can go, hang on a second, oh my God, I can totally see how I'm generalizing from my experience to many experiences. I'm deleting information that I don't want to see, or I'm distorting things that maybe are facts and I'm telling myself that they're not really facts, they're not really true. A clue that we are stuck in an unhealthy position or a confirmation bias is we feel rigid. We feel kind of like we have to fight and hold and maintain a perspective. It is possible to be absolutely passionate about what you believe and be absolutely being open to being wrong. The moment we're trying to persuade others that we are right and they are wrong, and it's almost like the more we do that, the more we convince ourselves of our perspective, the more we're in danger of not seeing the whole picture. One of the things that served me very well over recent years is when I'm making difficult decisions or complex decisions, is to actively go out and seek information that contradicts my perspective. In fact, a friend of mine a few years ago, when a particular political leader rose to a very powerful position, noticed that I was following them on Facebook, and they sent me a message and said, I'm so horrified by this person that, I've been looking at who of my Facebook friends is following that person. I notice you are, and I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, what's going on? And my perspective was, I deliberately have curated my Facebook feed to show me things that I don't necessarily agree with. Because one of the dangers of Facebook is a great place for confirmation bias, that we follow a narrow group of people and we have friends of people that share the same perspectives. We go deeper and deeper and deeper into a certain position. And I think it's really important to stay informed about people that don't agree, people that hold different perspectives, because no one is stupid enough to be wrong all of the time. And it's a whole other thing from integral theory. But the idea that often there are grains of truth, even in perspectives that we don't agree with. So be aware of rigidity, be aware of of narrowing the sources of information that you get, be aware of confirmation bias, and see if you can be open to and curious about different perspectives. I think it's a really healthy and I think it's a really important thing. This is a big, big topic, and I think it may well be worth going into some of the other pieces around how do you notice confirmation bias more, how do you challenge your own confirmation bias. But I'd love to hear your comments. Like, what does this trigger, or what does this open up, or what do you notice in yourself around your own confirmation bias? So please do share in the comments below the video. Thanks for watching. And tomorrow on Thoughtful Thursday, I'm going to talk about 7 keys to support healing, like 7 key ideas or principles that will help support the healing journey. So I look forward to talking with you then.